Our intervals, C major, A minor, and related modes, this time looking at the E Phrygian mode, focusing on centering around measuring from the E note located on the 5th string down from the top of the guitar, fret number 5, and this is part number 3. Remembering one of our major objectives is to orientate all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar, who is of course located behind the guitar. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but no, we just flipped it around to mirror your perspective from behind your guitar as though you were playing it into a mirror. Similarly, our Excel worksheet representing the fretboard will have this as the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling on top. Top to bottom, left to right, orientated as though we just took our guitar and implanted the strings on the screen. We're continuing on with our interval practice, working around this E interval, and that means that we're going to basically be building a Phrygian modal scale, which sounds a little bit abstract because you might be thinking, why are we looking at the Phrygian modal scale and whatnot? Because that's not the most common types of scales that we build. But the reason we want to do that is because I want to see it as it relates to the other modes, which will help me with my chord construction and to basically be able to visualize how we can go from different scales, scale to scale, visualizing it in different ways. So I'm going to scroll back up and do a quick recap in terms of what we're trying to be picking up here, remembering our general idea is I want to do some of the stuff that is more, I wouldn't call it boring, although people do some of this tedious work. I think it's interesting. I work on spreadsheets all the time to see how things basically move around on the spreadsheet, but it is a little bit more intensive on the mind and less what people think of as creativity and more basically just understanding the fretboard so that you can then build on the creativity. And I would recommend doing that when your mind is active and working, you know, like 15 minutes a day, and you'll see a huge improvement on understanding this stuff. And if you can understand this stuff, then you can basically build on that and be more creative. So why are we looking at the Phrygian mode? Well, if we go up to the major scale, remember the major scale is our Rosetta Stone, our key. Everything that we're referring back to typically is the major scale in Western music, although it's just another mode, which would be, from modal terminology, called the Ionian mode. All of the other modes are just related to it. That's how we can pack it in our mind so that we can visualize it and pack in a lot of information in our mind. That information being the formula, the visualization, the structure of the major scale and all of the other modes, which allows us to pack in basically there's 12 notes in the musical alphabet, 12 major scales then times 7, right? Because there's 7 related modes, and we can kind of pack them all and relate them to each other, making it easier to basically memorize those items. So we're gonna learn it in the major, C major, because that's typically an easy thing to do because the C major doesn't have any sharps and flats, which gives us a nice point of reference to see if we're made an error by hitting a sharp or a flat when we look at the scale. So we're looking not only at the C major, but the C major and related modes. I'm focusing on the middle of the guitar here so that when we do our interval practice, we can measure up and down the guitar. If I went from this A note, that would be a pentatonic, 5 notes. That would be 7 notes, all 7 notes that usually a lot of people learn to play from A to A, which means we'd basically be playing in the Aeolian. But if I started on the C and to C, I'd be playing in essence in the major. So these are all the notes that are in the C major scale and related modes. So what we want to do is then really kind of learn this major scale backwards and forwards and be able to see it from every point within the major scale, so that it would be similar to if you were filing stuff in alphabetical order like I used to in a CPA office and whatnot. It's really embarrassing when you're sitting there singing the alphabet from A to whatever every time you need to file a folder because you don't know how to say the alphabet from the middle of it, which most people don't because they don't sing the alphabet from the middle of the alphabet, you know? So what we would want to do is to be able to start from any point in the alphabet and be able to construct from that point, which makes us much more dynamic, much more easy flow, which allows us to then improvise and be more creative once we basically can understand that. If we can't get that, and I have to stop every time I have an idea so that I can re-say the alphabet from the beginning to wherever, to X or whatever, so that I can file a folder, that's going to take a lot longer. It's going to be tedious, it's going to be stressful. And so what we're trying to do is basically really learn this from each point. Now remember, a couple ways you can do that. You can learn the shapes, which I love doing as an Excel person because the fretboard is a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet, people. It's a spreadsheet. We're learning how to move the shapes around the spreadsheet, and it's great. And so we could do that, and we could just improvise that way. And I don't really even know. I don't need to know what I'm really doing. I'd like to know the target notes, right? But I can play anything to some degree within, and I can build different chords. Well, I don't even know what the chord is, but I can just make the chord in the shape, and I can be creative that way using my ear. I can also use the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half would be from the major scale. But again, I'd like to learn that formula from every point in the scale, which would allow me then, once again, to start on any note and build the scale around it, which allows me a huge level of flexibility. And then I also want to be able to learn the intervals, meaning start at any particular note and build around that note by using an interval construction around the center point being what I'm measuring from. That's what we're doing this time, which is very useful, so that when I start building chords, instead of just like building chords and reaching whatever I can with my fingers but not knowing what I'm playing, I can start to analyze the chords and say, what are the intervals between the chords? So that's the idea. So if I looked at the Ionian or major scale, what are the intervals? We got a perfect first, we got a 2-note away major second, a 4-note away major third, a 5-note away perfect fourth, a 7-note away perfect fifth, a 9-note away major sixth, and an 11-note away major seven. I would like to now look at the Phrygian. That's the one we're on here, and I'm going to be looking at the E down here on the bottom of the guitar and measuring from that point. This is going to be really useful even if I'm playing in the major scale. Why? Because I want to build a chord when I'm playing in C major, right? Or if I was playing in A minor, then when I get to the E note, I want to build a chord on the E note. Now I could just memorize that it's going to be a minor chord because I know that the related 2, 3, and 6 are minor chord constructions. That helps me to memorize the 1, 3, 5, a 3-note triad. But it doesn't help me to know what about the 7, 9, 11, and 13, the 9, 11, and 13 being equivalent to the even numbers that we skipped in chord construction, the 2, 4, and 6. I can't really know that unless I know the modes, right? So even if I'm not playing in the key of Phrygian, which is still fun to do, you might want to do that. I still want to know this, because if I label this E as the Phrygian mode, that will help me to build a more complex chord even when I'm playing in one of the other modes, like a C major in this case, or an Aeolian. So that's basically the practical component of it in one practical component. So if I go down to the Phrygian, then we're going to be measuring from this component. If I look at the intervals for the Phrygian, I still have a perfect first. They all have a perfect first, but then I have a 1-note away minor second. This is the only one that has a 1-note away minor second. The major does not, and the Aeolian also does not, which is weird. You would think the Aeolian, which is the main minor scale, would have a flattened second, but it doesn't. So the Phrygian is like the Aeolian, except it has a flat second. If you want to convert from the Phrygian, which you might know in this case from the E Phrygian to the E minor, all I have to do is unflat the second, move it to the right of the guitar, right? So then I've got a 3-note away minor third, which is what we would expect on a minor scale, same as the Aeolian or minor scale. The major scale would have a 4-note away major third. The perfect fourth and perfect fifth are the same as the major and main minor scale, which is what we would typically expect. The sixth is an 8-note away minor 6 or flattened 6, which is what we would expect, same as the minor scale. But the major scale would have a 9-note away major 6, and we have a 10-note away minor 7, which is a flattened 7, which is what we would expect in a minor scale, same as the main minor scale, the major scale having an 11-note away major 7. Okay, so we're also on the bottom of the guitar. We're measuring from this E, which means we're going to be doing a lot of measuring up above it, which I would wager that many people don't do well. Okay, so if you know how to do this, you possibly know something that a lot of guitar players, depending on how they learned the guitar, a lot of guitar players don't have any idea how to measure something from the bottom as though it's the root to make inverted chords, which is really cool and useful, especially if you're in a band, because if you're the only one that knows how to do that, you can play in different registers that other people can't play in, which allows you to do something a little bit different than what everybody else is basically doing, and possibly be in a register that's not going to clash as much with a different instrument, like a heavier instrument, like say a bass or something like that, right? So that's what, and we also know that the fault line is going to be down here, and so we're going to measure from this E and build our intervals, remembering that an interval can be thought of as like a chord, almost a 2-note chord. You usually kind of think of a chord with at least 3 notes, but you can think of it as a 2-note kind of chord. And then when you have 3 notes, then all you're doing is saying, what are the intervals for the 3 notes? Remembering, though, that if you have 3 or more notes, you have to decide which note are you seeing as the root of the chord. Because you can look at it from each perspective, just like in physics, right? If I was moving in a car and the other person was walking on the sidewalk, what would it look like from my perspective? And the car would look like the other guy's moving, but if I was on the sidewalk, it looks like the car's moving. Which one is correct? Well, it depends on your, right? You get that kind of argument happening. Same thing here. If we want to see the chords, I want to be able to switch my mind to each side of the chord, looking at the inverse chord. Why? Because again, if I'm trying to be creative, then I might be getting to this E, and I might be playing something that would be a different chord, but I'm looking at it from perspective of the E, because that's the chord I'm on, right? So instead of making a simple triad that's always going to be the 1, 3, 5, I might make more of an exotic chord, but I'm going to look at it from the perspective of the E and see if that fits into what I'm doing, right? Even though it might, from a different perspective, it might be a D chord of some kind, right? Or something like that, just because I had a D in it. You know, we might more commonly call it a D chord, but no, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the E because that's what I'm on in my progression. Okay, so that's enough for the rant for the intro. Let me do a quick joke before I move on here. I'll try to, maybe this will be my only joke because it's kind of a longer one. I still think I should trim it down a bit, but this is my joke practice for the day. Before we dive into these, we got a lot to go through, so I'm going to try to do this quickly. Here we go. So, you know, my producer called me a wolf dressed up in sheep's clothing. Have you ever heard that phrase, a wolf dressed up in sheep's clothing? Can you believe that? It's ridiculous. First of all, I generally wear cotton because it's too hot for wool. Wool's too hot. I wear cotton, okay? And if I were a wolf, which I'm not, I'm just a little hairy, but if I were a wolf, I'd be more like a wolf dressed up in tree clothing, not sheep's clothing, because I wear cotton. And actually, cotton is not the clothes that a trees wear. Trees and cotton. What is cotton to a tree? I don't know. Actually, to a cotton tree, cotton. Oh, actually, okay. Actually, it's more like I'm a man dressed up in tree men. I'm just a naked, slightly hairy man dressed up in tree menstruation. Okay, not that I'm a tree expert or anything, but I feel like that's roughly accurate of what cotton is. And I feel like after, you know, now that I think about it, after they shear the sheep to get the wool from the sheep, they should at least give the naked sheep a cotton jacket until it grows back a bit. You know, that would be the nice thing to do. Plus, then you'd end up with a sheep dressed up in trees clothing. You'd have a sheep dressed up in trees clothing. Or, you know, a sheep dressed up in tree menstruation or whatever, right? Because they'd have a cotton jacket on, which may keep the wolves away, because the wolves are not generally attracted to cotton tree menstruation, thus freeing up the shepherd, who can then go save the world, since shepherds always seem to be like the person you want to be leading stuff, you know? At least that's according to the Bible. It seems like the shepherds are always like the super smart people that should be like leading stuff, but they can't because they're always too busy lead stuff because they're leading sheep, you know? Because otherwise the wolves attack the sheep, so they're stuck leading sheeps. I feel like Elon Musk was probably a shepherd, you know? Until he invented like the cotton coat for the sheep that kept the wolves away, freeing him up to then shepherd the building of SpaceX or something, you know? Anyways, plus I'm not a wolf either. I'm not a wolf in sheep's clothing because I don't like wearing wool, and I'm not a wolf. I'm just a little bit hairy, okay? I'm not that hairy. If I was as hairy as a wolf, I could run around naked in the snow and not need to dress up in sheep's clothing or cotton tree menstruation. Honestly, this is just another case of Phil crying wolf. You got to be aware of crying wolves, man. They're out there, I'm telling you. Remember, charity is giving to those in need, people. Not being blackmailed by a grown man using the tactics of a 5-year-old child whining for a candy bar in the supermarket. That's not charity. That's actually a kind of selfish, false virtue signaling cowardice if you give into those crying wolves, man. It's harming everybody involved. It's not helping anybody. On the 7-note away perfect fifth interval, remembering when we look at the perfect intervals, we basically expect them to be the same for the main major scale or Ionian mode, as well as the main minor scale or Aeolian mode, which they are. Therefore, we get a lot of practice looking at the 7-note away perfect fifth, which is appropriate because it's quite useful because it comes up all of the time. So in other words, we have a 7-note away perfect fifth available to us on all of the modal constructions. So whenever we build a chord within each of these scale shapes or modes, except for the Locrian. So that means that it's the power chord construction, which many people will see as this shape, which you can move all the way across the fretboard. It's also going to be critical to our normal chord construction because it has an odd number here. So when we look at our chords, we go 1, we skip the 2 to 3, we skip the 4 and go to the 5, the fifth interval. Therefore, it has the same name from a chord construction, noting that the 1 and the 5 from an interval perspective are always going to be the same on a 3-note chord. Therefore, if I don't know what the third is, I can almost always add a 5. Any note into the scale, I can add a 5 to it, and I have somewhat of an ambiguous chord, meaning I don't know if it's major or minor. It doesn't have the tonality of major or minor, but I still get 2 notes instead of 1, which is kind of cool if you're messing around and you don't know if you can. So if I'm picking a note that I know is in the scale, but I don't know how to build a chord from it, I can always add a fifth, except on that one note that's going to be for the Locrian mode. So that's useful to know. So, but now we're going to do it from basically down here. So if I was going to build a 7-note away perfect fifth, don't get this confused with the 5-note away perfect fourth. This is 7 notes away, how far away it is, and the perfect fifth is where is the point on the related structure to the scale. All right, so I could go 7 notes up, but that's too far to reach, and therefore I'm going to take the inverse distance as though I wrapped this string around in a circle. So if there's 12 notes in the musical alphabet, 12 minus 7 is 5, remembering that the perfects are inverses of each other. So it's a 5-note away, 7-note away perfect fifth has an inverse of a 5-note away perfect fourth. So if I go 5 back, then I'm going to go back to this B. So there, if I was on this E right there, if I went from the open B to the E, that would be then a 5-note away perfect fourth. But if I went from the E to the B, that's going to be then a 7-note away perfect fifth. Okay, let's go above it now. So if I go above it, I'm going to pick the B up here. Then I have to look for the inverse distance whenever I go above it, which is what a lot of people don't really grasp too well. So we're going to say, all right. And they also don't grasp that we're going to cross the fault line. That's why they kind of stay away from building chords from the bottom up oftentimes, unless you learned to do that using possibly sheet, tablature, which has the low or the high pitched string on top oftentimes. Any case, so if I go up one, I look for the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 7, which is 5. So I look for a distance of 5. Noting that the fault line is between these, so I have to go diagonal up the fault line to count to 5. So it's going to be just 5 negative back this way. So that shape is only going to be the shape that on this, when I go up one string, on this string, because the fault line is between this tectonic plate and this tectonic plate. This tectonic plate shifted to the right. So if I was to see it from here, I'm going to go up to that B. So if I measured it from B down to E, that would be a 5-note away perfect fourth. If I went from the bottom note, the E, to the B, therefore, that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. So if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be 1 fret back, but normally I wouldn't cross the fault line. So for example, if I was here, I would not cross the fault line. If I was on the continent on the bottom, if I was here, I would not cross the fault line. So the rule is, normally, if I go up one string, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be on the same fret unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be 1 fret back. All right, so let's go to 2 strings up. 2 strings up. We're going to go to this B up here. So I'm looking for the 7-note away perfect fifth, inverse distance. 12 minus 7 is 5. Looking for a distance of 5. I have to go this way across the fault line, so that's 5, distance of 5. I'm calling it -5, -10, and then 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So there we have it. So if I count from here, I would count it out like this. -5, -10, 10, -10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Boom. So if I went from this B then, from this B to that E, that would be a 5-note away perfect fourth. If I went from the bottom, the E, to the B, that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. Therefore, if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started above the fault line on the G or the D, right? If I started on the G string, or if I started on this D string, let's say, then I would go up to 2 strings up here. So notice that basically the fault line pushed the root to the right, so it's a longer distance if I wasn't crossing the fault line. So the general rule is, if I go up 2 strings, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 7-note away perfect fifth will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward. Okay, let's go another string up, and we're going to go to here. So now we're going to look for the 7-note away perfect fifth. So I take the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 7, or distance of 5. I have to go diagonal across the fault line. So it's going to be -5, -10, -15, 12 notes in the musical alphabet. Let's bring it down by taking 15 minus 12 is 3. So -3, -4, -5. So let's do that here. We're going to say going this way, diagonal this way to go 5, and then 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is -3, -3, -4, -5. So if I went from this B on top to the E, that would be then a 5-note away perfect fourth. If I went from the B on the bottom to the top, therefore, that would be the 7-note away perfect fifth. So if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 7th note away perfect fifth will be 1, 2, 3 frets back. There would be only one time I wouldn't cross the fault line, which is if I started on this G string. So if I started on this here, then I wouldn't cross the fault line, and I'd go up to here. So the rule would be if I go up 3 strings, then the 7th note away perfect fifth will be 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which is going to happen on the bottom 2 strings, 2 out of 3 times that I can go up 3 strings. In other words, the bottom 2 strings, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 7th note away perfect fifth will be 1, 2, 3 frets forward. 3 frets back. I'm sorry, 3 frets back. All right, let's go to the last one. This isn't the last one. We got to go below it too, but we'll go to this one. Now, if I go to the one up top, you might say, hey, look, why don't I measure the one below it? Since that's the same string, that'll be easier. So I could say if I want to look at that top string, I can look at the bottom string and just match it to the top. So if I go down, I don't need to look for the inverse distance. It's just a 7th note away perfect fifth. So 7 notes away would be 5, 6, 7. There's the B here. Therefore, the B is also up here. Let's count it up this way, though. It would be an inverse distance. 12 minus 7 is a distance of 5. This would be -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3. -3 plus 5 is -8. -8, -7, -6, -5. All right, we got there. Whew. So that's why. So if I go from here, it's going to be -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3. 3 plus another 5 is 8. So -8, -8, -7, -6, -5. All right. So if I went from here, top to bottom, from the B to the E, that would be a 5 note away perfect fourth. Therefore, from bottom to top would be a 7 note away perfect fifth. That means that if I go up 4 strings, I will always cross the fault line. So there is no exception to the rule. So if I go up 4 strings, I will cross the fault line, and therefore the 7 note away perfect fifth will be 2 frets forward. I can only go up 4 strings if I start on the bottom 2 strings, unless I think about going around the top of the guitar, which you can think about, but you have to take into account that the top and bottom strings are the same. They repeat. They are the same, and then it'll be like you went up another string, right? So if I went around the top of the guitar, I'd say, okay, the E string repeats, and then it would be the same pattern after that. Okay, so then if I go down 1 string, we already took a look at it. We go below it, the 7 note away perfect fifth. I don't need to take the inverse distance. I can just count out 7 notes instead of 5 notes, be 5 right below it, and then 6, 7. So 5 right below it, 6, 7. There's my power chord shape. That's the shape we're possibly most familiar with. That means that top to bottom, 7 note away perfect fifth, which means that bottom to top would be the inverse, 5 note away perfect fourth. So if I go down 1 string, the 7 note away perfect fifth will be 2 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on this G string, in which case if I happen to go down 1 string from there, if I go down 1, so the rule would be, if I go down 1 string, the 7 note away perfect fifth will be 2 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the G string, in which case if I go down 1 string and cross the fault line, the 7 note away perfect fifth will be 3 frets forward. All right, I'm going to try to go a little bit faster here because I want to get through the next 2 of them. Hopefully it doesn't throw me off. Let's go to the next one. We have a 8 note away minor 6. So the minor 6 is flattened. So on the major scale, it would be a 9 note away major 6. We flattened it as we would expect on a minor mode like the Phrygian mode. And so the 8 note away minor 6 would be the same interval construction if it was the main minor that we were building, like an E minor. That would also be an 8 note away minor 6. The only difference in the intervals from the Phrygian to the minor scale is that second. The Phrygian has a 1 note away minor second, the minor scale having a 2 note away major second still. All right, so this 6 represents that it's the 6th relative position in our scale. This 8 represents the distance in half steps, noting it's an even number. Therefore, in chord construction, we have to rename it because we skip all the evens. It's 1, 3, 5, 7. The 7 is the last note in the scale, and then we go to the 2. Then we go to the 9, which is equivalent to the 2, 11, which is equivalent to the 4, and 13, finally, which is equivalent to the 6. So we're looking for an 8-note away minor 6, which you could also call from a chord construction an 8-note away minor 13. Okay, so it's 8 notes away, so I can't go 8 notes forward, and therefore I'm going to go inverse distance, wrapping the string around in a circle in my mind, and say if I go one way, 8 notes, and there's only 12 notes distance, 12 minus 8 is going to be 4, so I can go 4 notes back, 1, 2, 3, 4, there it is. So if I'm on this E, then I can say it would be 1, 2, 3, 4 notes back to this C. So if I went from this C, whoops, is that right? Yeah, I got C to E, that would be a 4-note away, which would be a major third. If I went from the E to the C, therefore, that would be an 8-note away minor 6, remembering that the inverse of a minor is a major, the inverse of a major is a minor. So if I look at this major 6, we're going to recognize some of the shapes most likely as, because we recognize them as the inverse, which is possibly a more popular interval, right? The 4-note away major third. All right, so let's go above it and say we have to, if I go above it, I've got to look for the inverse distance. So let's find it first. Okay, and I'm going across the fault line. So we're going to say if it's an 8-note away minor 6 or 8-note away minor 13, then I have to look for the inverse distance to go above it. 12 minus 8 is 4. So I'm looking for a distance of 4. But I'm crossing the fault line. The distance between the strings is usually 5, but to get to that 5-note distance, you can also think the distance between these two strings happens to only be 4, so you can memorize it that way. I still count in 5s typically, so I usually say it's going to be 5 going this way and then 4, other than counting, because I want to go up strings counting in intervals of 5, because I can count by 5 more easily than counting 4 and then, so I go 5 and then 4. That's how I would do it. So I'm going to go up from here and say, okay, it would be 5 going back here and then 4. So if I went from top to bottom, C to E, that would be a 4-note away major third. Bottom to top, therefore, would be an 8-note away minor 6. So that means if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 8-note away minor 6 would be on the same fret. But I wouldn't cross the fault line except on that place, right? So if I was over here, let's do it here, then it would be up here, right? That would mean that the root, see, this root got shifted forward because of the fault line. So if I wasn't on the fault line, the C would be up there, right? And if I was up on this continent up top, same shape. And so you possibly recognize this shape as your normal shape going from C to E, which would be of a major third, 4-note away major third, right? And then the inverse, therefore, is an 8-note away minor 6, except for here because of the distance. So typically then, if I go up one string, the 8-note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8-note away minor 13, will be 1 fret forward unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the E string, in which case, if I go up one string and cross the fault line, the 8-note away minor 6 will be on the same fret. All right, so let's go up 2 strings then. Going up 2 strings. So we're going to go up to here. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward. So if I go up then 2 strings, let's count that out. I have to look for an 8-note away minor 6, which can also be called an 8-note away minor 13. Inverse distance, 12 minus 8 is a distance of 4. I have to diagonally count to 5 this way because of the fault line, and then 10 going straight up. So I'm going to call that negative 10, negative 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So there we have it. So if I counted it from here, it's going to be negative 5, negative 10, negative 10, negative 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So way up here. So we're on that C. All right, so if I went from this C to that E, that would be a 4-note away major third, and therefore if I went from the E to the C, that would be then an 8 note away minor 6. Therefore, if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 8 note away minor 6, which can also be called the 8 note away minor 13, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I was starting on the G or the D string, and I could still go up then 2 strings from there. Let's take a look at this E, for example, and then I go up 2 strings and I'd be out here. So now that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets forward, which is about as far as you can reach. If I could go the other way, you would see that this is an equilateral triangle, right? We're right in the middle. It would be 6 this way and 6 back, because there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. So the rule is, if I go up 2 strings, the 8 note away minor 6 will be 6 frets forward and 6 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the B and the E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, I would typically want to go forward because it would be a lesser of a distance, and it would only be 5 frets forward in that case. Okay, so then let's go up another one. Let's go up to here. So now I'm going to go up to here. We're looking for an 8 note away minor 6, which could also be an 8 note away minor 13. I have to look for the inverse distance because I'm going above it. 12 minus 8 is 4. I'm going across the fault line, so I'm going to count 15 diagonally from here. I'm sorry, 5 diagonally. 5, negative 10, negative 15. There's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, so I can say 12 minus 15 is 3. And so I'm going to say negative 3 and negative 4. Boom. Let's count it from here. So I'm going to say negative 5, negative 10, negative 15. 15 minus 12 is 3 and 4. So if I went from this C to that E, that would be then a 4 note away, which would be a major third. If I went from the bottom here to here, E to C, therefore, that would be an 8 note away minor 6. So that means that if I go up 3 strings, then the 8 and cross the fault line, the 8 note away minor 6 will be 2 frets back. The only time I wouldn't cross the fault line is if I started on this G, which would be above the G string, above the fault line. So if I was on this E and I went up 3 strings, then I would be right there. So the rule would be, if I go up 3 strings, the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will be 1 fret back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the B or the E string. 2 out of the 3 possible strings I could use to go up 3 strings, in which case, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will be 2 frets back. Okay, let's go to the top one, the top rope. We're going to the top rope. Watch yourself, because I got a lot of potential energy sitting up here on the top rope, man. They're not scared because I'm too skinny. You're lucky, though. So I could still I could jump off the top rope really high, though. And then I get a lot of momentum, even though I'm relatively light. I still have potential energy up here. You better watch yourself. Anyways. So now we might go to the bottom string now and say if I should count it out on the bottom string because it'll match. That'll be easier. So I'm looking for an 8 note away minor 6. If I go to the string below it, I don't need to look for an inverse distance, but just a distance of 8. I'm not crossing the fault line, so it would be right underneath 5, 6, 7, 8. There's the C there, same C up top. If I counted it up top, it would be negative 5 going this way, negative 15, negative 10, negative 15. 15 minus 12 is 3. Negative 3 plus another 5 is 8. So I'm going to say negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4. Boom. I think I got that right. Let's count it out this way. Negative 5, negative 10, negative 15. 15 minus 12 is negative 3 plus another 5 is negative 8. Negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4. Boom. So if I went from this C to this E, that would be then a 4 note away major third. If I went from the bottom to the top, that would be an 8 note away minor 6, and therefore if I go up 4 strings, the 8 note away minor 6 would be 4 frets, 3 frets forward. I would always cross the fault line unless I think about going around the top of the guitar. So therefore I don't really have to say I crossed the fault line. If I go up 4 strings or down 4 strings, and I'm not thinking about going around the top of the guitar or the bottom of the guitar, then I have to cross the fault line, and therefore the distance will always be the same. So if I go up 4 strings, I'll always cross the fault line, and therefore the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will always be 4 frets forward. Okay, if I go below it then, which we already took a look at briefly, looking at the 8 note away minor 6 below it, I don't need to look for the inverse distance. I just look for 8 notes instead of 4 notes, and I don't need to do a diagonal movement because I'm on the same continent, so I'm just going to go down 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom. So if I count it out here, 5, 6, 7, 8, boom, top to bottom would be an 8 note away minor 6, and therefore from bottom to top would also be a 4 note away major third. Therefore, if I go down 1 string, the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will be 3 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string. And if I was on the G string, then going down 1 would be up here. It's just out of, let's go up a bit. I can see it right there. Boom. So it would be out here. So the rule is if I go down 1 string, the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will be 3 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which happens on the G string, in which case if I go down 1 string and cross the fault line, the 8 note away minor 6, which could also be called the 8 note away minor 13, will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward. All right, let's do one more. I'm going to try to squeeze in this last one. Whew, let's do this. Let's do it. I'm going down to the 10 note away minor 7, remembering that it's a minor 7, so you would expect it to be a minor 7 in a minor mode as the Phrygian is. It would be the same interval for the related minor scale. A minor scale has a minor 7, which is the Aeolian scale. So does the Phrygian. A minor mode also has a minor 7, which is what we would expect. The major scale would have an 11 note away major 7. So we have a flat 7. It is a 7 here, therefore it could be in our chord construction without renaming it because we skip every other note, 1, 3, 5, 7. However, the 7, of course, is not in the 1, 3, 5, the normal triad. So we're adding that 7, and we have to be careful because the 7 will not follow the same conventions, particularly having all of the majors and the minor modes having the same 7. All the minors, by the way, have the same minor 7, so there is no major 7 in a minor mode. In other words, whether we're playing the Phrygian, the Aeolian, or the Dorian, they all have a minor 7. But on the major side, they're not all major 7s, right? The Ionian or major scale has a major 7. But the mix, and so does the Lydian, but the Mixolydian has the flat 7. That's why when we learn the triad chord constructions, the 1, 3, 5, it doesn't help us. Those same rules don't apply, meaning a nice delineated line on intervals between major chords and minor chords doesn't apply necessarily to all of the other modes, right? So in any case. Also, when we look at this one, this is the one that you kind of want to identify, especially if you're going in a bluesy thing from a major scale to a minor, because then you can kind of fudge that 7. And also note that the 7, even if you're in a minor scale, has that nice leading tone if you add the major 7. So in other words, let's look at it here. So if I go forward, it would be 10 notes forward. I'm not going to go forward. I'm going to imagine the string in a circle and say, well, if I went 10 notes around one way and it's in a circle, then I would say 12 minus 10 would be 2 notes back going the other way around the circle. That would be back to this D. So if I was on this E and go 2 notes back, I'd be on this D. So if I went from D to E, that would be a 2 note away, which would be a major 2nd. But if I went from the E to the D, that would be a 10 note away minor 7. So what I want to point out with this, where would the major 7 be? It would be, let's do it this way. Right there's the major 7. So the major 7 is the leading tone going back home you see in a major scale. The minor scale doesn't have that leading tone going home, but you can always throw it in there, particularly if you're going home, right? So if the E is my home, my tonic, my root, then I can always walk up, and even if I'm in a minor mode, I can always kind of I can use the major 7 to lead in to go home. So that's, and you can always use like a half step and kind of work it in anywhere you're going. Like a half step is like kind of legal for the most part, but in particular, it's going to be legal if the half step is leading to a particular note that you're trying to emphasize. And that is especially true, of course, if that note is the tonic, right? So that means that if you're in a minor scale, you don't have that leading tone, but you might, if you're going home, you can kind of always do the half step as you go home, because you get the half step is legal number 1, and because it's the half step before the home, which makes it even more legal in my mind to do. So it'll sound okay. Okay, you get what I'm saying. So if I go up here, let's go above it. So now we're going above it, so we have to look for the inverse distance. So it's a 10 note away minor 7. 12 minus 10, therefore, is 2. So I'm looking for a distance of 2. So I have to go diagonal because we're crossing the fault line. So this is going to be 5 going this way, negative 5, I'll call it 4, 3, 2. That's a flat 7, so the major 7 would be right here. I'll just kind of emphasize that so you can kind of see it. And you can always see it because it's going to go back to the tonic, right? So if that's the minor 7, the major 7, and then home, tonic. So let's go this way. We're going to say this is going to be negative 5, negative 4, 3, 2 here. So that'd be D. So if I went from the D to the E, that would be a 2 note away, which would be a major 2nd. If I went from the E to the D, that therefore would be a 10 note away minor 7. 10 note away minor 7. So if I go up 1 string and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 2 frets forward, but that's the only time I would go up 1 string and cross the fault line. If I was down here, I wouldn't cross the fault line. And if I was up above, I wouldn't cross the fault line. It would be, that's not wrong note. So the rule is, if I go up 1 string, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 3 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up 1 string and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 2 frets forward because the tectonic plate shifted what we're thinking of as the root inwards or forwards. All right, let's go up 2 strings. 2 strings up. We'll go here. All right, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back. So if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, I look for the inverse distance. So 10 note away minor 7 has an inverse of 12 minus 10 or 2. Diagonal to go 5, negative 5, negative 10, negative 10, negative 11, negative 12. That gets me to the octave. I can say 12 or 0, negative 1, negative 2. All right, so let's do it here. So I'm going to say negative 5, negative 10, negative 10, 11, negative 10, 11, 12, or 0, and then 1 and 2. So if I go all the way back to that open D, if I went from top to bottom, it would be a 2 note away major 2nd, and therefore bottom to top will be a 10 note away minor 7. So if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back. I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started on the G or the D string, and I could still go up 2 strings. So if I was on like this E, for example, and I went up 2 strings, it would be a little bit easier of a reach. So the general rule, if I go up 2 strings, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the bottom E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back, 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 baby. Okay. Let's say I'm on the same string. So we're going to go up above it. So we have the 10 note away minor 7 has an inverse distance of 2 notes away that we're looking for. Crossing the fault line, going diagonal this way, -5, -10, -15. There's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, therefore 15 minus 12 is 3, and then 2. Okay, so we're going to say this is going to be from here, 5, 10, 15, -15 minus 12 is -3, and 2. So if I went from top to bottom, D to E, that would be a 2 note away, which would be a major second. Therefore, from bottom to top would be a 10 note away minor 7. Therefore, if I went up 3 strings and crossed the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 would be on the same fret. But I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started on the G string. So if I was on the G string and I went up 3 strings, it would be up here. So the general rule is, if I go up 3 strings, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1 fret forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, which are the only 2 out of 3 times I could go up 3 strings unless I go around the top of the guitar, in which case, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be on the same fret. Okay, let's go to the next one up. We're almost done, almost there, and then we have to stop. The good times will have to stop once we finish, because you can only have so many good times, and then you have to sleep. Then you need to eat stuff and sleep. Eating stuff and sleeping is good times too. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're going to go up 4 strings, noting that if I go up 4 strings, I might as well go down 1 string and then match it to going up 4 strings, because it'll be the same note. So if I go to the string below it, I look for a 10 note away minor 7. I don't need to look for the inverse distance. I look for 10 notes away. Right below it will be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's the D here. The D matches up top. But let's count it up top, in which case I have to take the inverse distance, 12 minus 10, which is 2. Going diagonal, 5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3. 3 plus another 5 is 8. So -8. -7, -6, -5, -4, -3, -2. Let's count it out over here. So we're going to say -5, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 8 is, plus another 5 is 8. And then -8, -7, -6, -5, -4, -3, -2. So from this D to that E, top to bottom would be a 2 note away major second. Bottom to top, therefore, would be a 10 note away minor 7. Therefore, if I go up 4 strings, which means by default I will cross the fault line because I can't go up 4 strings without crossing the fault line. Therefore, the distance will always be of a 10 note away minor 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward. Okay, let's go to the one below it. So we're going to go to the one below it, which we already saw briefly. So if I go below the string, looking for a 10 note away minor 7, I don't need to look for an inverse distance. It's just distance of 10. So we're going to say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to be from here, boom, down, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's possibly the most common way to play it. It's a bit of a reach, but doable, even with normal hands. If you stretch your fingers out, if you work on, stretching your fingers, then, so that means that if I go down 1 string, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward, unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string, in which case if I was on like this E, which is on the G string, and I go down 1 string, it would be out here. So that would be a bit of a reach right there. So the rule is, if I go down, is that right? I'm going from this E, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 1, 2, 3, yeah. So if I go down 1 string, then the 10 note away minor 7 will usually be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward, unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the G string, in which case if I go down 1 string and cross the fault line, the 10 note away minor 7 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets forward, which is just out of reach, which also means that if I went the other way, it would be 6 frets back, That's that equilateral triangle, because there's only 12, so 6 frets is the maximum distance you'd have to go if you had the capacity to either go forward or backwards on the guitar without running out of room, hitting the nut, or hitting the gap here or whatever, so you can't go there any further. So that's going to be it. Whew. Let's stop it there.